So good morning, everyone. And as I said, afternoon and evening for some people, we have an international testimonial call today. And so I'm going to just start. And these are all friends of mine and many people on this call. And they've had some incredible experiences with our redox molecules. So we're just going to get started here. So I'm going to start with Karen. She's from Sweden. And a lovely lady, just a beautiful soul, comes from the heart, and she's had an incredible experience with these molecules. So Karen, over to you.
Well, hello there. Finally, it's my turn to make the speech. I joined ASEA like 2.5 years ago, and I joined as just for fun. I thought it was I was skeptic. But quite fast, I started to learn about what these molecules can do. And the best way to find out is to get your family to use it. And that's also the toughest thing to do. I have 2 boys, twin boys, that will be 24 in September. And one of the boys, he has a disability. He's using a wheelchair to get around. And like 2-3 years ago, when he moved to a boarding school to do his finals, he was kind of depressed. And he said that nothing was really fun. And I wanted him to start using the fantastic molecules. And so I made it sent to him, and he told me he did take them, but he didn't. It wasn't that easy to ask people to help him, and they were just laughing at him. So he didn't really use them, but when he started to use them, it kicked in exactly the way we wanted to. The depression, like it left him, he felt a lot better. But the best result was when he started to drive around his manual wheelchair. Because what I could remember, it was only 0.06 miles, 100 meters, when he was complaining, saying, I don't want to, it was too heavy, it was too difficult. And when he then started to use the ASEA constantly, every day, morning and evening, it changed. He just kicked in and started his wheeling around his wheelchair, and it started with the Runkeeper app. You know, you could send me the message. And the first time, I think it was around, I have to check, it was around 1 kilometer, which is 0.6 miles. And 30 days later, he made it up to 6 miles, 10 kilometers. And now he is doing it every 3 times a week, between 3 and 6 miles, up to 10 kilometers. And he has also recently signed up for a gym, because now he's moved back to live with me. So he's signed up with a gym and has his personal trainer, and they are going to do big things. The trainer doesn't know yet, but he's going to be one of Marcus' first associates. And good time. You have a week to get started. And Marcus' twin brother is also a user of these molecules, and he has no disabilities, nothing. He's a young guy, but he realized this is good stuff. It helps me, and he's also training. Now you're going to get a bonus, and that's my dog, because I took her to surgery the other day, and coming home from the surgery, the day after, she started with some heavy infection in her eyes, really heavy infection. So I mailed the veterinarian and asked for help, but I had my help myself. So I started, of course, to give her a lot more ASEA and spraying it in her eyes and in her nose. 36 hours later, she's clean. So, you know, this is good stuff. It works. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Karen. That was an amazing testimonial. Next, we're going to go to Canada, where Peter Graham lives. Peter Graham's been a good friend of mine for a long time also. He's an incredible chef, and that's how he first became hurt. So I let him tell his story. Peter?
Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you fine. Go ahead.
Yeah. So my ASEA journey started in 2013 when I was approached by a friend that said that he had something that would help me with my clarity, with my brain fog. As Debbie mentioned, I was a chef, and I walked in through a banquet room door, and I had a 75-pound speaker fall off of a shelf and land on my head and bounce off my right-hand shoulder, and they basically scraped me up off the floor. And I spent the next 3 years trying to be able to work again. So from that accident, I had an awful lot of body discomfort, but the biggest thing that always bothered me was brain fog in the morning. It would take me, after I got up, it would take me anywhere from 2 to 3 hours just to get clarity as to what I was doing. And so even in 2013, you know, that was still going on. But when my friend first approached me, I was getting ready for 2 sons' weddings. I had 2 sons that got married that year, so I was busy looking after that need as compared to worrying about anything else, because I was functioning. But if I did something like trying to go shovel snow or rototill the garden, it would put me in bed for 2 or 3 days. So a lot of body soreness, a lot of body talk. Anyhow, once I started concentrating on drinking this stuff, thanks Debbie, and doing some 3-ways with friends of hers, they suggested that I up the amount that I was taking and double it every day, and until I got rid of the brain fog. And so that's what I did, because I was looking for very quick results. And I think I doubled it 3 times, and the 3rd day, I think, was the first time in 20-some years that I woke up that I didn't have brain fog. I was just totally blown away by it, you know, and I've never had that ever since. So it's really good. And as the speaker before said, if you're a little skeptic about it, start introducing it to friends and family, and see the results that they get, and you'll be totally blown away. If I've got enough time, I can do a quick view as to what's sort of happened to me this past year. If got time, Debbie?
Yes, you do. Go ahead.
So last year in May, I went to a school play, and on the way home, I mentioned a shortage of breath, and I couldn't quite understand what was going on. But in 3 days' time, when I woke up, I had a very hard time breathing. When I phoned the doctor, he told me it would be 3 weeks before I get in. And it was probably just the pollen floating in the air, and not to worry about it. So I didn't worry about it, booked the appointment, and a week later I was phoning him again saying, hey, I need to get in because I just cannot breathe. And the rest of me, I felt really okay. And that was on a Wednesday, and the first that they could get me in was the following Monday. And so I asked him what my options were, and he said that there was a clinic opening in a city that's nearby us. And if I was really being bad in the morning, I should go to the clinic and see if they could put me in. So when I phoned the clinic the next morning, the person that was talking to me says, boy, if you're talking that bad, you better get in here as quick as you can. And so I went. And when they took an x-ray of my lungs, they found out that there was just a shiny spot in the lungs. They didn't really know what it was, but the rest of my lungs were so black that they asked me if I was a very heavy smoker. But I looked like I was somebody that, has been smoking for all my life, probably 3 or 4 packs a day, which kind of surprised me. But no, not me, because was a non-smoker. And so they didn't put me into hospital. They put me on antibiotics, and that cleared that up. Unfortunately, for a week later, I ended up having a brain attack in the brain, or whatever you want to call it, that left my whole right side paralyzed, and within minutes, I couldn't even talk. My wife called the ambulance, and while we were waiting for the ambulance to show up, she kept on um, giving me a Cia to drink. And when I arrived at the hospital, I was about 4 hours before I could actually walk again. 6 hours later, I could talk again. They still kept me in for a week, monitoring me and getting me walking properly and all the rest of that, which was really nice. And was in that program and going through that program afterwards with flying colors. They actually had people that came into my house for me, because I do live out in the country. I'm a fair piece in the middle of nowhere, is what I say, and seem to be recovering quite well from that, to the point where I asked the doctor if I could go camping, because I always had a family camp every summer, and the doctor said no problem. Unfortunately, at the family camp, I came down with what I thought was indigestion, and it wasn't indigestion at all. I ended up having blood flow restrictions in a particular organ in my body, and that resulted in a 4-hour ambulance ride back into a major city, where they performed a couple of different operations and put extra parts in my body. That sort of stopped all work for me for a good 6 months, but I have recovered quite nicely. I have very, very little side effects from all of what happened last year, to the point where the doctors are weaning me off of all the medication that they have me on, because you just can't supposedly quit it. And I'm actually being studied through the same hospital as to the results I have, because they just don't see it. They say that typically I would be 3 years and being really good and having really good recovery normally, as compared to a year. So they're quite happy with my progress, and we'll see where all that goes.
Sounds like you're going to see a miracle, Peter.
And I will say that the other miracle about it is, a year later, the checks are still rolling in. So
Absolutely.
back to working again and loving it.
Wonderful. Can you just answer how much ASEA you've been taking? Just to
Lots. I started on a program of drinking 2 ounces of ASEA every 2 hours, because we know that that's where it's performing its maximum, and I did that for probably a good 6 months. I'm back down to between 8 and I'm going to say 10 ounces a day on a regular day, just so that I feel really good.
Okay. Thank you so much. We're so happy you had ASEA, because we love you and we love being with you. So thank you very much for that amazing testimonial.
You're welcome.
We're now going to go back to Sweden. There's another beautiful friend of mine named Marie. So Marie, would you like to tell us what's happened with you, with the molecules?
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So my name is Maria, and I live in Stockholm, Sweden, and I'm 53 years old. I'm a single mother, and I was introduced to ASEA in November 2018, so a year and a half ago. And I'm not a salesperson, but I can't stop talking about this. I'm sorry. So that's why I'm here. I hadn't been to the doctors. This was a year and a half ago, and I had pain in my joints. I had short sleep cycles. I had cramps in my legs. I would wake up with cramps in my legs, and from the pain, I would wake up. And I had menopause discomforts in different ways. which also brought, you know, moods up and down. And my child, you know, he got a lot of that from me. So I'm really sad about that, but that's all stabilized now. I was a low energy person. I was devastated when I got home from work. I had 3 jobs that I worked at the same time, but my energy is now so much higher. And at one point I went to a friend's house, and we were going to have just a coffee or tea. And I don't know, I poured boiling water on my wrist, right? By my hand right there where I have my watch. And it just started becoming a big, huge blister. It was like, I don't know, 2 by 2 inches or something. And I was watching it, and it happened in 30 seconds. So I started pouring cold water, and then I remembered I got Renew in my bag. So I picked it up really quick, and I started putting it on, and I was there for 4 hours, and the pain went away. The blister kind of just sunk down again. And at night when I went to bed, I didn't even have pain. I had a little red mark, but nothing else. And I thought I would have to go to the emergency room and get it all, fixed up and bandaged and all that. But that was just right in front of my eyes how it works. And then there was another occasion when we went up north in Sweden to a friend's house, and she had a cat. And I know my son has a cat allergy. And so we were going to pack the allergy medicine, and we were going to go there and spend the New Year's Eve with them. And so we did, and I forgot the medicines, and he did too. So at night, it was 1:30. We went to bed, and he started coughing, like this asthma-like coughing. And I started looking for hospitals around, in that area. And they were 250 kilometers away, and they would open at 6 o'clock in the morning. So I got scared, and I remembered I had my ASEA bottle. I gave him 1 cup, which is it 2 or 4 ounces? I can't remember now. But in 15 minutes, he was down and sleeping, and there was no coughing at all that night. So it just works. You have to use it and see how it works. And try it. It won't hurt you, and you will notice differences in your body. So
Beautiful.
go.
Thank you so much, Maria.
Mm-hmm.
I greatly appreciate that. As you can see, the molecules help with things all over different areas and different people's bodies. So know that this stuff goes to where it's needed. The next person we're going to have on is Joe Christador, another good friend. He served our country in the Army, and he's had some incredible results with the molecules. So Joe, are you there?
Hey, Debbie, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Of course. Oh,
Great.
You're outside. How beautiful.
Yeah, it's too nice out not to be outside.
Exactly.
So I was introduced to who now is a friend of mine, Sharona, and when one of the first stories that I got was actually from Debbie, from her son. And what intrigued me was he was a runner, and my story is kind of starts there. So I had run 2 marathons, and I was getting ready to run my 3rd, and it felt like I had trained pretty decently. And as you know, for those of you that have done workouts before, run, are probably very familiar with the fact or concern that you have about the quality of your workouts and run. So as I started to walk to the finish line, my goal was clear in my mind on what I wanted to do, and then it wasn't still again sure whether my training was up to snuff. I looked to my left, and I was running with my aunt at the time, and I said, "Let's go." As the cannon blast from the cannon started the Marine Corps Marathon in DC. I was excited and nervous to try and reach my goal, which was not to stop and run the 26.2 miles. But it was also the first time I was running with Redox molecules. So again, wasn't 100% sure. To see how that went. Sorry, hold on a second. Sorry, I was actually reading from a script.
Just come from your heart, Joe.
No, that's cool. Um, so as the other two races that I had run, one of the things that if you don't know about running is you hit the wall, and I'll explain a little bit more of that in a minute. But normally at around 20 or 21 miles, there's this bridge, right? And it's one of those spots where a lot of runners hit a point where your body turns into basically like Frankenstein. It's like you're trudging through, trying to get up this hill, and it's right in front of the Pentagon, and it doesn't look like much of a hill if you're driving it, but I promise you it is. Most people at that point they'll take salt pills, because again that's where your body just is completely depleted of energy, and a lot of times you're dehydrated. And as I started to hit that mark, I started to take a SIA every 2 ounces every 5 miles. So this was my at that point where I took another 2 ounces as I started to go up this hill. And so what was, I wasn't sure how it was going to affect me. Um, and at that point, my legs were feeling fairly strong, so I was kind of anticipating that it was going to actually get me through the bridge. And to my delight, I made it through the bridge without stopping. So now I had about 6 miles left, only 6 miles, which it's kind of funny when you're at the 20-mile mark. 6 miles doesn't seem that long. So that run was through Crystal City. And honestly, the last 6 miles were kind of a blur, except, believe it or not, the 0.2 miles. It's right in front, it's right at the tail end of the Arlington Cemetery, and it's 0.2 miles, and I swear it feels like about a 90-degree incline, but it's very steep, and I can share with you guys that I actually did reach my goal, and which was four. I didn't stop running, and my time was about 4 hours and 20 minutes. Wasn't my best time, but it was close to my best time 2 years earlier. Um, and then the next challenge came into effect, which walking doesn't necessarily seem like a difficult task, but it is after running a marathon, and because your muscles start to kind of relax and kind of tighten up, um, and it's hard to move. And what kind of surprised me was I usually struggled the other two marathons walking up or down stairs, and I kind of used the railings of the stairs as like an elderly person would use a walker, supporting most of my weight to walk up or down stairs because I would be afraid that my legs would completely give out. And I started taking, I increased my amount of the Redux that I was taking, which was, I went through an entire bottle in 2 days. Um, and to my surprise, my legs weren't weak; they were strong. And what really blew me away was the longer term recovery. Um, I ran 4 miles 5 days after the marathon, which may not seem like a big deal, but normally that time frame would take anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks before I felt like I was able to run. So I continued to run, and those aches and pains that I heard about when I was in my early 30s, that you start getting aches and pains around 40. I'm 43 now. I still don't have, and I still run today, and the recovery still is amazing. Um, and how quickly this helps, like you were a child. So um, that's that's my running story. I do have another story if we have some time, or actually that's my 5 minutes. I'll pass it over to somebody else.
Okay, thank you so much, Joe. That's an incredible athletic feat for anyone, and it's just an incredible response with the molecules. And so thank you for being our athlete. You can tell you still work out. It's a good thing. Pearl was just commenting. Anyway, we're now going to go to, and if anybody has children, this will touch your heart, to another very good friend, Shannon, and she has an incredible testimonial for us. So Shannon.
You didn't even hear me say hi. Hi.
Hi.
So thanks for having me, and thanks, Sharona, for asking if I would share today. And I can totally relate with some of the other people that have said how skeptical they were when this started. Not only was I skeptical, I had something added in there. I was desperate. And I'll get to why I was so desperate in a minute, but I want to start with a little bit about my daughter before we started ASEA. My daughter was born with a compromised immune system. She barely survived her birth, and she had a very, very tough road. The first 6 months of her life, she was hospitalized for more than 2 to 3 days on 4 separate occasions. And for a 6-month-old, that's a lot to go through. A lot of that had to do with upper respiratory issues. We couldn't explain it, but my daughter had just a really tough time with breathing and maintaining oxygen. And this continued on and through her infancy and also as a toddler. But I share that because the people that know about Abigail's story, we hear the seizure part. But what people don't realize is that we really struggled with so many other issues before she even was diagnosed with a disorder that caused her to have seizures. My daughter started having seizures, I believe, before she was actually a year old, but I could pinpoint it at about 14 months. And she was diagnosed at 16 months. At the time, she also had an extreme speech delay. She was more than 75% speech delayed, which, because she was so small and because of all of her other issues, I, as a special ed teacher, didn't even realize how delayed my child was because I was focusing so much on other aspects of her health that I was missing some of the benchmarks that she was not hitting. So she started medication for seizures when she was 16 and a half months. She started speech therapy at 17 months, and that continued for more than a year. I would say about every month to 2 months, we increased her seizure medication. And at the age of 2.5, she was taking more than her brother, who also has the same disorder, who's 2 years older and was twice the size. But unfortunately for my daughter, she was not helped by medication. On the highest dose of medication, she was still having 6 to 21 seizures a week, again, at 2.5. And there came a situation that happened, and sorry, this happens all the time. I get a little emotional when I think about the visual of my daughter. Her name's Abigail. She had seizures, but this time it was followed by vomiting, which had never happened before. But in my experience as a teacher, that medical challenges, the vomiting's not a good sign. And she had vomited twice and then went into more seizures. And all I remember is seeing her look lifeless on my floor and trying to decide, am I going to call the paramedics? Am I going to wait and see what happens? And finally, I just scooped her up after she came out of the last one, after 3 times vomiting, strapped on a bib, and just hightailed it to the hospital, making phone calls on my way. And during that stay, they gave her an IV, they gave her something to help the vomiting stop, but I wouldn't leave the hospital until they gave her her seizure med because I just had this gut feeling that we were not ready to go home. And at the time, because she was so young, obviously it was in a syringe, and within 5 minutes, she started throwing up again. And it was that, then we ended up staying at the hospital because we were trying to figure out what else. Said, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep watching my child go through this. I'm not going up on medication anymore. It's not doing anything. I was doing other natural things that weren't helping. And I was sad. I was sad to see this small little thing go through this almost on a daily basis. So I finally said yes to trying ASEA. I don't know what happened to my camera there. And for Abigail, it was a much slower process. It took probably 3 to 4 months for her to respond in a way that I could see. She stopped having seizures at the 4-month mark, but she started talking at about 3.5 months into ASEA. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, sorry.
We can still hear you. I stopped your video because you were going in and out with internet.
Yeah, it's my internet connection. It's a blessing.
So go ahead, please.
Yeah. So what was funny is that I went into this for just looking, noticed that my child that was having all these upper respiratory issues, which I didn't even acknowledge till 6 months down the line, because I wasn't even paying attention to what it was doing for her immune system. But she was getting better. She was breathing. She was starting to talk. She was just making such significant progress that at about 6 months on ASEA, her speech therapist said, "You're about to lose your services," because we were getting free services through the county, because she's made so much progress in such a short amount of time that she was no longer significantly delayed enough in her speech to receive services. So then a lot has happened, but I'll fast forward to 2 years on ASEA, where her neurologist and I had a discussion of, I really want to pull her off meds because they've done nothing for her. And I found something that has helped her become seizure free. So very reluctantly, her doctor and I talked about the weaning process, but the big reason her neurologist, who was very opposed to ASEA in the first place, agreed was because we did another brain scan. Abigail, among other things, and this was not necessarily related to her seizure disorder, she had about 75% to 80% scar tissue on the frontal lobe of her brain, which was not explained because it was consistent of a brain trauma that she did not have that we knew about. She was never dropped. She never ran into anything, but she had all this scar tissue. So after 2 years on ASEA, and we get another look at her brain, something that medication cannot fix, her doctor called me. I was actually at the ASEA convention, ironically, and said, I, in my 37 years, have never seen a child. Not only, she just wanted to make sure the scar tissue stayed the same because her concern was that it got worse because of her age. She was 5 at the time, that it should have gotten worse or stayed the same. 40% of it was gone. And that she just said that doesn't happen and medication can't do that. And I finally was like, okay, would you agree that it could be the redox molecules that she's drinking? She could neither confirm or deny because we were on a recorded line, but we kind of all know the answer there. She's just too old school to admit it. So we slowly started weaning actually both my children off medication. And it took about 4.5 months. And then we stabilized while we decreased, and I know I'm going over time, I'm so sorry, I'll be quick. While we decreased her medication, I upped her ASEA to a point where she was on double what she was taking. And 4 months after she was completely off medication, we did another 4-day stay at Children's Hospital, which showed there were absolutely no seizure activity in her brain whatsoever. And I had a medical team of 13 doctors and a whole bunch of other fellows in the room looking at my child that's singing and dancing and wondering why the heck she was in there in the first place. So I just have a lot. There's so much more to the story, but that's kind of the cliff notes. And if you met my daughter, and some of you have seen the video, you would have no idea the roller coaster of life she has gone through. Thank you. I know I went over time. I apologize.
No, please, Shannon, your story is very important, as was everybody else's. And we just, again, thank whoever you thank for finding out about these molecules. I can't imagine your daughter or your son being on medicine for the rest of their lives. It would have been awful, and it definitely would have shortened their lives. So we can't say how grateful we are for being able to find these. So I'm going to say goodbye to everyone and let you go. We have another call, but thank you all for sharing. I'll put the recording out to everybody so we can use this. It was an incredible, another testimonial call. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Have
Thanks,
a great
everyone. Thanks,
Thank you.
Debbie.
day.